From starting as a mysterious child to becoming a hero of unparalleled strength and legend, today I explore and analyze one of the 1990s greatest protagonists, Ryu from Breath of Fire 3. Welcome to Heronalysis. From the beginning, with a brief summarization of Ryu, an orphaned boy, unaware he is the last of an ancient brood lineage, must master his dragon-given power to either perpetuate or break a cycle of divine control, all the while wrestling with the question of whether destiny can be defied or if he is doomed to become the very force he fights. Ryu is presented as innocent, and the gradual growth he has throughout the game are central components to what make him such a compelling and emotionally resonant protagonist in Breath of Fire 3. Unlike many RPG heroes who begin their journeys as seasoned warriors or rebels with a clear vendetta, Ryu starts as a blank slate, a naive, almost feral child with no understanding of the world beyond his forest home. This innocence isn't just a narrative quirk, it shapes the entire story, making his evolution from a helpless boy to a reluctant savior feel organic and deeply human. His ignorance of his own power and heritage mirrors the player's own discovery of the game's lore, creating a natural synergy between the protagonist and audience. Every revelation, whether it's the truth about the brood, the fate of the dragons, or the moral weight of his transformations, lands with greater impact because we experience it alongside him, wide-eyed and unprepared. What makes Ryu's growth particularly engaging is how it's tied to loss and vulnerability. Early in the game, he's sheltered by Rei and Tipo, two streetwise orphans who drag him into their misadventures. Their dynamic is almost brotherly, full of playful mischief, but when tragedy strikes, such as Tipo's death or Rei's descent into a feral state, Ryu is forced to confront the brutality of the world without the luxury of remaining a child. His innocence isn't just stripped away, it's shattered, and the game doesn't shy away from showing how ill-equipped he is to process it. Unlike protagonists who harden into cold avengers, Ryu's grief is quiet but palpable. He doesn't swear revenge or deliver grand speeches, he simply presses forward, clinging to the kindness he was raised with even as the world tries to corrupt him. This makes his resilience far more poignant. The pinnacle of Ryu's growth lies in his relationship with his own power. His draconic abilities are a double-edged sword. They grant him strength to protect others, but they also threaten to consume him. The game's best moments come when Ryu is forced to reckon with what it means to wield such power, not just physically but morally. The light and dark dragon paths aren't just gameplay mechanics, they reflect whether Ryu has managed to retain his humanity or succumb to the rage and sorrow that have dogged him. His innocence early on makes these choices clear and meaningful. Would the Ryu who once played with Tipo in the desert knowingly unleash destructive power? Or would he seek a gentler resolution, even if it's harder? The tension between his pure-hearted beginnings and the grim reality of his destiny creates a protagonist who feels real in a way many silent RPGs don't. Ryu's journey works because it's coming of age in the truest sense. He isn't a hero, he was chosen. He becomes one because he refuses to let the world's cruelty extinguish his empathy. His growth isn't about gaining strength, it's about learning when not to use it. In a genre filled with loud, charismatic protagonists, Ryu's quiet evolution from innocence to wisdom makes him unforgettable. Ryu's mysterious heritage and the weight of his journey serve as a beating heart for the story's narrative, transforming him from a typical silent protagonist into a figure of profound mythic resonance. Unlike heroes who chase glory or revenge, Ryu's journey is one of unraveling, a slow, often painful excavation of self that blurs the line between human and deity, between inherited fate and free will. From the moment he awakens in the desert with no memory of his origins, the game drapes him in layers of enigma. Why can he transform into dragons? Why do gods and monsters alike fear his bloodline? These questions aren't just plot devices, they're mirrors held up to Ryu's character, forcing him and the player to confront what it means to carry a legacy you never asked for. The brilliance of Ryu's heritage lies in how it's withheld. The Brood aren't just introduced as noble guardians or ancient warriors, they're spoken of in whispers as boogeymen or extinct legends. This slow burn of revelation makes every clue feel seismic. When Ryu learns he's the last of a line designed to serve the goddess, it's not a triumphant chosen one moment, it's a horror-adjacent realization that his very existence is tied to cycles of destruction. The game definitely avoids cliché by making Ryu's power a curse as much as a gift. His transformations aren't just cool, but mechanically, they're devices that are physical manifestations of an identity crisis. Early dragons are feral, uncontrollable, echoing Ryu's own fear of what lurks inside him. Later forms like the Kaiser Dragon flirt with godhood, tempting him with the same corrupting power that doomed his ancestors. This tension between embracing his destiny or defying it elevates Ryu beyond a mere avatar for the player. He becomes a tragic figure, wrestling with a bloodline that demands sacrifice. What makes this struggle truly compelling is how it intersects with the game's themes of nature versus industrialization. The world of Breath of Fire 3 is one where ancient magic is suffocated by greed, embodied by the tyrannical Church of St. Eva and the industrialized city of Windia. Ryu's heritage positions him as a living relic of that dying world, a weapon who could either restore balance or accelerate its ruin. His final choice, Light Dragon's Hope versus Dark Dragon's Fury, isn't just a gameplay fork, it is the culmination of everything that the narrative asks. Can destiny be rewritten? Is violence the only language left to the divine? The game refuses easy answers, and Ryu's silence in these moments becomes eerily powerful. His lack of grand speeches underscores the loneliness of his role. The Brood were never meant to be people, just tools for higher powers. By the end, whether he submits to fate or forges his own path, his journey feels like a rebellion against the very myths that created him. His lack of grand speeches underscores the loneliness of his role. The Brood were never meant to be people, just tools for higher powers. By the end, whether he submits to fate or forges his own path, his journey feels like a rebellion against the very myths that created him. In a genre saturated with heroes who wear their destinies like capes, Ryu stands apart because his legacy is a burden, not a badge. The mystery of his bloodline isn't just lore, it's the core of his humanity. Every dragon transformation, every cryptic encounter with deities like Miria or Yggdrasil forces him to ask, am I the heir to a throne or the prisoner of a design? That existential dread, paired with the game's refusal to fully resolve it, even the best ending implies cycle continues. He's not a hero who masters his destiny. He's one who stares into the abyss, and the abyss stares back. Ryu's role as a symbol of balance in the game is not just a thematic device, it's the very chain that binds him to destiny, forcing him into a crucible where he must either transcend his fate or be consumed by it. From the moment he awakens in the desert, he is more than an orphan boy. He is the last living fulcrum between warring cosmic forces. the dying embers of the dragon gods, and the rising tide of human industrialization. The world does not allow him the luxury of ignorance or refusal. His bloodline demands that he meditate, a conflict he never chose. Unlike protagonists who seek power or revenge, Ryu's journey is one of inescapable duty, where every step forward is a tightening of destiny's grip. The game's central tension, whether he will succumb to the destructive legacy of the Brood or forge a new path, is not a choice, it's a trial by fire. His resolve is not born of ambition, but of the grim understanding that there is no one else. This burden of balance manifests most powerfully in his dragon transformations, which are less abilities and more fail-safes of fate. Early in the game, his shifts are involuntary rage, or desperation triggers that become monstrous forms, reflecting how little control he has over his own power. As he grows, the transformations become more deliberate, but also more perilous. The Kaiser Dragon, a form of near-divine annihilation, embodies the paradox of his role. To restore balance, he must wield power that threatens to unmake balance. The game's pivotal moment, the choice between light and dark dragon paths, is not a true branching path, but a test of resolve. Both options are framed as necessary extremes. The right answer is not about good or evil, but whether Ryu can carry the weight of his role without losing himself. The goddess Miria, herself another failed arbiter of balance, looms as a warning. Those who try to control the scales often become the very force that tips them. Ryu's strength lies not in conquering this paradox, but enduring it, walking a razor's edge where surrender means destruction and triumph demands sacrifice. What Ryu's struggle so compelling is that the game never absolves him of it. Even in the best ending where he rejects Miria's cycle of control, the implication lingers that balance is not a permanent state, but a continuous act of will. The factories may fall, the dragons may sleep, but the world's equilibrium remains fragile. Ryu's destiny does not end with a coronation or a sunset, it ends with him shouldering an eternal vigil. His resolve is not the flashy defiance of a rebel, but the quiet, grinding perseverance of a lone guardian, the kind of heroism that goes unseen. In a genre where protagonists often reshape the world through sheer force of will, Ryu's narrative is hauntingly different. He is not the author of his own fate, but the vessel through which fate itself has endured. And that perhaps is why he lingers to the memory long after the credits roll, not as a conqueror, but as a man who stared into the abyss of destiny and walked into it anyway. Ryu's passivity, the muted personality that he has, and underdeveloped moral agency ultimately did undermine his potential as a fully realized protagonist in the story, leaving him feeling less like a driving force of the narrative and more like a hollow vessel swept along the currents of other character stories. While silent protagonists can work in RPGs when the story is designed around player projection, the story's deeply personal and emotionally charged narrative demands a protagonist capable of engaging with its themes, something Ryu doesn't do that well. His lack of agency in pivotal moments makes him seem less like a hero and more like a bystander in his own journey. When Tipo dies, Rei descends into feral rage, or the truth about the Brood is revealed. Ryu's silence and blank expressions drain these moments of their emotional weight. Unlike other silent protagonists such as Chrono Trigger's Chrono, whose friendships and heroism are often demonstrated through action, Ryu rarely takes initiative, making it difficult to connect with him as a character rather than just an avatar. This passivity becomes particularly glaring in the game's moral dilemmas. where Ryu lacks any kind of expressed opinion or internal conflict, reduces what should be a profound philosophical choice to mere gameplay mechanics. The light and dark dragon paths, for example, are framed as defining moral crossroads, yet Ryu never grapples with their implications in any meaningful way we as the player can see. Does he fear the destructive potential of his power? Does he struggle with the burden of being the brood's last heir? The game leaves these questions unanswered, relying on the player to project depth onto the character who shows little sign of wrestling with these dilemmas himself. Compare this to a protagonist like Terra in Final Fantasy VI, who actively questions her identity and purpose, or Xenogears Faye, whose trauma and self-doubt shape his every decision. Ryu, by contrast, feels like a passenger in his own moral journey, reacting, or often not reacting, to events rather than shaping them. Ultimately, Ryu's flaws as a protagonist stem from a mismatch between the game's ambitions in the narrative and its adherence to outdated RPG tropes. Breath of Fire 3 wants to tell a story about legacy, sacrifice, and the cost of power, but its central character lacks the voice, agency, or emotional depth to properly carry those themes. While his mysterious heritage and symbolic role as a balancing force give him intrigue on paper, in practice he feels frustratingly inert. A few key moments of expressed emotion, rage, grief, or even just decisive action could have elevated him from a passive observer to a more compelling hero. Had Breath of Fire 3 been made later with Capcom's Dragon's Dogma or Monster Hunter's storytelling experience and gameplay mechanics, Ryu might have been more vocal and proactive. Instead, he's a fascinating but flawed hero, a product of his time and the game's growing pains. Overall, Ryu isn't a bad protagonist, but he's held back by traditional RPG tropes that clash with the game's deeper themes. With more agency, expressiveness, and moral complexity, he could have been one of the genre's greats. However, he's just a solid hero with untapped potential. Thank you for listening. Please consider subscribing, commenting, and sharing the video. I greatly appreciate you being here and taking the time to view my content, and who knows, I might take a suggestion from you for a future video.